It was just another ordinary day at the tech store. The kind of day where customers walked in, looking for the latest gadgets, or perhaps just browsing out of curiosity. The employees, used to the hustle and bustle, moved between the aisles, offering help when needed, but mostly staying busy with their own tasks. The store was busy, but not chaotic. It felt like a typical day, one that wouldn't be remembered. A man walked in, nothing particularly out of the ordinary about him. He was dressed casually in a plain t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers, like any other customer in the store. His appearance didn't stand out. No one took a second glance. He wasn't tall or short, loud or quiet. He simply blended in with the crowd, as if he were just another person looking for the perfect gadget to buy. The employees didn't notice him at first. They were helping other customers, chatting about products, and answering questions. The man walked through the store slowly, taking in the shelves filled with gadgets, electronics, and accessories. He didn't rush. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. His presence barely caused a ripple in the usual flow of the store. But he wasn't like the other customers. His presence would soon become something no one would forget. But for now, he was just another face among the many who wandered in and out of the store every day. As the man wandered through the aisles, he took a closer look at the newest laptops and phones. His eyes scanned the displays, but there was no rush in his movements. He seemed to be weighing each product carefully, just like any other tech enthusiast might do. The store employees continued their tasks, helping customers here and there, but no one paid any special attention to him. He stopped at a high-end gaming laptop, reading the specifications on the screen. A young employee standing nearby was adjusting the displays. She noticed him, but she didn't seem particularly interested. She was busy with another customer, and when he looked up at her, she gave him a quick smile. "Can I help you with anything?" she asked, but her tone was more out of routine than genuine curiosity. "I'm just looking for the right laptop," he said in a calm voice, but there was no recognition in his words. She didn't seem to catch on that there was something different about him. The employee pointed out a few features of the laptop, and the conversation continued with the same energy as any other transaction in the store. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know he was one of the wealthiest people in the world. To her, he was just another guy looking at overpriced tech gear. A few minutes passed, and he moved on to the next section, where a man was looking at the latest smartphones. The two exchanged a brief glance as he passed by, but no one gave him any special attention. He wasn't wearing anything that would scream billionaire or famous CEO. He was just another guy who looked like he could be anyone. The store continued with its normal rhythm. People came in and out, chatting with employees, asking about deals, and browsing the products. The man, with his quiet demeanor, blended into the background. No one could have known that the quiet man in the corner was Mark Zuckerberg. After a while, the man stopped at another section near the back of the store. It was where the newest gadgets were displayed. Smart home devices, virtual reality headsets, and high-tech gaming accessories. He stood there for a moment, looking at everything with a keen interest, but still not drawing attention to himself. A young salesperson, maybe in his mid-20s, approached. He seemed a bit too eager to make a sale. He adjusted his glasses and asked, "Can I help you with anything today, sir?" His voice was polite, but had that forced enthusiasm, the kind of tone used by employees trying a little too hard to make a good impression. The man glanced up. "Just looking," he said casually, as if it were nothing out of the ordinary. The salesperson nodded and started talking about the latest smart home devices. He went on and on about their features, the convenience of voice control, the integration with apps, and the impressive smart assistant functions. But the man didn't seem particularly impressed. He simply nodded every now and then, politely listening, but not really engaging in the conversation. The salesperson seemed to notice but didn't mind. After all, he'd seen plenty of customers who were just browsing without any real intention to buy. Then, the salesperson made a suggestion. "If you're interested in something a little more unique, we also have a limited edition gaming chair in stock," he said, his voice rising a little. It was clear he was trying to close the deal, but the man's response was cool and measured. "I'm not really into gaming," the man replied. "Oh, okay, sure. the salesperson said, clearly unsure how to continue. The moment became slightly awkward. The employee stood there for a moment, waiting for the man to ask more questions or show more interest. But the man simply turned, looking back at the tech gadgets with quiet curiosity. The salesperson hesitated, then went back to another customer who seemed more enthusiastic. The interaction felt just like any other. Nothing stood out. The man was just another person, silently observing, not making waves. No one had a clue that this quiet, unassuming man was one of the most well-known figures in the tech world. The man continued to browse the store, his hands lightly touching various gadgets as he walked past. He stopped at a display of the newest smartphones, comparing their features on a nearby screen. His interest seemed to grow more focused, but there was still no rush in his actions. The store continued its usual pace, with customers coming and going, employees assisting others, and the quiet hum of the tech-filled atmosphere filling the air. After a while, the man turned toward the counter and approached one of the sales representatives standing behind it. He paused for a moment, looking at the displays of expensive products neatly arranged behind the counter. The employee glanced up, still preoccupied with something else. She didn't immediately notice the man, so he patiently waited for her to finish her task. "Excuse me," the man said softly, breaking the silence. The employee looked up, giving him a polite smile. "How can I help you?" He didn't waste time. "How much for everything in the store?" The employee blinked, momentarily confused. She glanced around, unsure if she'd heard him right. "Sorry, what did you mean? Like just one product, or?" He repeated his question calmly, his tone unchanged. "I mean, how much for everything you have here? I'd like to buy it all." At first, the employee thought it was a joke. It wasn't uncommon for customers to make offhand comments about buying everything, especially when it came to high-end products. She laughed lightly, assuming the man was just having some fun. "Are you serious?" she asked, half smiling, still unsure of how to respond. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "I'm serious. Everything." She paused, looking him over carefully. His calm demeanor threw her off. She wasn't sure if he was playing around or actually serious. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something different. He wasn't joking. "Let me get the manager," she said, finally realizing this was no ordinary request. The employee hurried away, her steps quick and uncertain. She passed through the aisles, making her way to the back office where the manager was. Meanwhile, the man stood by the counter, calm as ever, his eyes casually scanning the displays. The store's atmosphere seemed to shift slightly, as if the conversation that had just unfolded was hanging in the air, unnoticed by everyone except the few who'd overheard it. A few moments later, the manager appeared. He was a middle-aged man, well-dressed, with an air of authority that suggested he'd handled all kinds of situations before. He walked straight toward the counter, his eyes focused on the man standing there. The employee quickly explained the situation, though she wasn't quite sure what to make of it. "He says he wants to buy everything," she said, trying to sound professional but clearly baffled. The manager didn't seem surprised but also didn't know how to respond. When the manager reached the counter, the man turned to face him. There was no hint of nervousness or impatience in his demeanor. He simply looked at the manager, his voice still calm as he repeated his request. "I'd like to buy everything," he said again. "How much for everything in the store?" The manager paused for a moment, taking in the request. He glanced around at the shelves, at the inventory, trying to calculate in his head, but something felt off. The way the man spoke, the confidence in his voice, it didn't seem like a prank. He was serious. The manager's mind began racing. Was this a joke? Was the man some kind of influencer or celebrity playing a prank for a viral video? Or was this, in fact, something much bigger than he could grasp? The silence between them stretched, and the manager could feel the weight of the moment. And then, with a deep breath, the man spoke again. "I'm Mark Zuckerberg," he said simply. "I'd like to buy everything." The moment froze. The manager's face went pale. He recognized the name immediately. Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook. The very man who had revolutionized social media and become a household name. The man standing before him was a billionaire, and he had just asked to buy everything in the store. The realization hit the manager, and his eyes widened in shock. The manager's mind was racing. He stood there, staring at Mark Zuckerberg, completely taken aback. The name had finally clicked, but the idea that the quiet man standing in front of him was one of the richest and most influential people in the world was almost impossible to process. He could hardly believe it. For a brief moment, the manager didn't know how to react. He blinked, unsure if this was some kind of misunderstanding or if he was truly standing face to face with the man who had changed the way the world communicated. The employee, still standing behind the counter, looked at the manager and then back at Zuckerberg. The realization hit her too. Her eyes widened, and she took a small step back. She looked like she might faint from the surprise. Mark Zuckerberg, still calm and composed, waited for the manager's response. His request was simple, almost casual, but it carried the weight of something far more extraordinary than anyone in the store had expected. The manager, now fully aware of who he was dealing with, cleared his throat and tried to regain his composure. Mr. Zuckerberg, he began, still unsure of how to proceed. You're serious? You really want to buy everything? Yes, Mark replied, his voice steady and confident. I'd like to buy everything you have, every item in the store. The manager nodded slowly, his mind working overtime to figure out how he was going to handle this. He had never, in all his years in retail, experienced anything like this. He took a deep breath and picked up the phone, dialing the store's higher-ups. He needed to make sure this was real. Within moments, the higher-ups confirmed what the manager had already suspected. It was indeed Mark Zuckerberg. They told him to proceed as requested. The manager turned back to Mark and smiled, though it was a bit shaky. All right, Mr. Zuckerberg, we'll get this started right away. Mark nodded. He didn't seem bothered by the surprise or the confusion around him. He was calm, almost as if this kind of thing happened every day. I'll take care of the payment, Mark said. He pulled out his phone and began typing something, and within minutes, the payment went through, an amount so large it made the store's systems blink in disbelief. No one said a word. The reality of what just happened was sinking in. Mark Zuckerberg had just bought the entire store.